some enhancement drugs to make you better on the court, but then you blame it on mental health. Can we just stop the man? Just admit it. You cheated.
After a suspension that rocked the NBA, Paul George is firing back at critics. But insiders say PG might be deflecting heat, possibly toward LeBron. Now, an NBA owner's announcement has the league on edge. Is this damage control or the start of something bigger? Let's get into it. It started with the fall of Paul George. On January 31st, 2026, the NBA dropped a bombshell that nobody saw coming. And when I say nobody, I mean not a single soul in the basketball world had this on their radar. The league came out and announced that Philadelphia 76ers forward Paul George, a 9-time All-Star, one of the most gifted two-way players of his generation, had been suspended without pay for 25 games for violating the NBA anti-drug program. 25 games, gone, just like that. Now, to really understand how devastating this was, you have to look at the timing. Paul George is in his second season with the Philadelphia 76ers after signing a massive 4-year, approximately $212 million contract in July 2024. This was supposed to be the year that everything came together for the Sixers. They had their big three, George, Joel Embiid, and Tyrese Maxey. And after years of heartbreak and playoff disappointments, Philly was finally supposed to be a serious contender. And here's the thing that makes it sting even more. Just 4 days before the suspension dropped, Paul George had played what many called his best game as a Sixer, dropping 32 points with 9 3-pointers against the Portland Trail Blazers on January 27th. He was cooking. He looked like the Paul George everybody remembered from his Indiana Pacers and LA Clippers days. And then boom, suspended. The league didn't say exactly what substance was involved. They cited privacy under the collective bargaining agreement, but the basketball world is smart. People know the rules. A 25-game suspension lines up perfectly with a first-time violation for what the NBA calls drugs of abuse, a category that includes substances like cocaine, methamphetamine, opioids, PCP, LSD, and ketamine. This is not the same as getting caught with marijuana, which barely gets you a slap on the wrist these days. And it's definitely not the same as performance-enhancing drugs like steroids, which carry an 80-game suspension for a first offense. So whatever Paul George took, it fell right in that middle category. Bad enough to get you 25 games, but not PED level bad. Now, Paul George knew he had to get in front of this. So he released a statement through ESPN's Shams Charania, and this is where things got interesting. He said, "I've discussed the importance of mental health, and in the course of recently seeking treatment for an issue of my own, I made the mistake of taking an improper medication. And that right there is the part that made everybody pause." He framed the whole thing around mental health. He said he was seeking treatment, and along the way, he took something he wasn't supposed to take. Now, on the surface, that sounds like the right thing to say. He took responsibility. He apologized. But a lot of people in the media were not buying it, not even a little bit.
Took some enhancement drugs to make you better on the court, but then you blame it on mental health. Can we just stop the man? Just admit it. You cheated. You need a little bit extra kicker.
That reaction right there was shared by a lot of folks across the sports media landscape. The feeling was that Paul George was using mental health, something that is very real and very important, as a shield, as a way to soften the blow and make people feel sorry for him instead of holding him accountable.
Just admit it. Just admit it. You're getting older here. You're feeling the weight of that contract. You want to make sure that you're a good player on the Philadelphia 76ers.
And that's what a lot of people were thinking, but didn't want to say out loud. Paul George is 35 years old. He's battled injuries his entire career, foot surgeries, knee problems, shoulder issues, you name it. He just signed one of the biggest contracts in NBA history. The pressure to perform was immense. And maybe, just maybe, he took something to help himself feel better, play better, recover faster, and then tried to dress it up as a mental health issue when he got caught.
I mean, the fact that he deflected and made it about mental health was just crazy. Just own it and move on, because, Donnie, nobody will care in another week.
But Paul George didn't just own it. He wrapped it in the language of mental health advocacy, and that rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. Now, here's the other side of this, the money side. The suspension cost George approximately $11.7 million in lost salary, based on his $52.8 million salary for the season prorated per game. That is a staggering amount of money to lose. But for the Sixers ownership, this suspension actually created an opportunity, and that's where things get really interesting. See, before the suspension, the Sixers were sitting about $7 million over the luxury tax threshold. When a player gets suspended and isn't getting paid, that money doesn't count against your cap. So suddenly, the Sixers went from being $7 million over to only about $1.25 million over the luxury tax line. And if you're Josh Harris, the owner of the 76ers, and you're looking at the reality of what your team is, you're doing the math real quick. You're thinking, we didn't do this. We didn't make a trade. Our player got suspended for his own mistake. And now we're just a sliver away from getting under the tax and saving ourselves millions.
When you've got a team together that's finally winning, they put it together, you swallow hard, and you realize that you made the plan to be over.
That's the reality of the business side of the NBA. Sometimes a player's mistake becomes an owner's opportunity. And with the trade deadline sitting right there on February 5th, the Sixers had a very real chance to make a move to duck under that luxury tax line entirely. And that brings us to the bigger picture. Because as bad as this was for Paul George and for the Sixers' on-court chemistry, something else happened in the aftermath that nobody predicted. Paul George's suspension, his explanation, his excuses, and the whole mess surrounding it accidentally ripped the lid off a conversation that the NBA has been trying to keep quiet for years. A conversation about who else in the league might be taking things they shouldn't be taking. A conversation about double standards. A conversation about the biggest name in basketball history. And that conversation was about to get very loud, very fast. The Whisper Network, LeBron James, and the Open Secret. Now here's where the Paul George story takes a turn that nobody expected. Because the moment PG got suspended and tried to explain it away with mental health, people in the basketball world started asking a very dangerous question. If Paul George gets suspended for 25 games for taking an improper medication, then why isn't the league looking at everybody else? And by everybody else, they didn't mean some role player on the bench. They meant LeBron James. This is not a new accusation. This is something that has been bubbling underneath the surface of professional basketball for years. But Paul George's suspension cracked the dam wide open and let everything flood out at once. So let's walk through exactly how this unfolded, because it involves some of the biggest names in sports, current players, retired legends, MMA fighters, and even the founder of the most infamous doping lab in American history. It starts with a man named Chael Sonnen. For those who don't know, Sonnen is a former UFC middleweight contender, an ESPN MMA analyst, and a man who has been very open about his own history with performance-enhancing drugs. He failed multiple drug tests during his fighting career, including a 2014 bust for EPO and human growth hormone that led to a 2-year ban. So when Chael Sonnen talks about PEDs, he's not speaking from the outside looking in. He's speaking from personal experience. And back in March of 2023, on the Flagrant podcast with Andrew Schultz, Sonnen said something that shook the entire sports world.
What do you think he's doing? Only one. We have the same drug guy, if you will. I know exactly what he's doing.
Let that sit for a second. A man who has personally used EPO, who has been caught and punished for using EPO, just went on a major podcast and said he shares the same supplier as LeBron James, and he wasn't done.
EPO matters. It's the reason LeBron takes it. It matters. And if other basketballers understood what it did, EPO increases your red blood cells,
And then he explained exactly what EPO does. It increases your red blood cells, which gives you endurance.
Which gives you endurance so you can play all game long. You can shoot in the fourth
More
quarter
red blood
just like
cells,
you
more
shot in the
oxygen
fourth
in your
minute.
red blood cells. Okay,
yes.
got you.
So according to Sonnen, EPO is the reason LeBron James, at 41 years old, can still play 35 minutes a night and look like he hasn't lost a single step. He called EPO the king of performance enhancers and compared LeBron's regimen to what he called the Lance Armstrong diet, EPO, human growth hormone, and testosterone. He even went on the PBD podcast in February 2024 and doubled down, saying he and James use the same dealer and he sees nothing wrong with it. Now you might be thinking, this is just one guy and he's from the MMA world, so maybe nobody in basketball took it seriously, but that's where you'd be wrong, because the very next big name to weigh in was a Hall of Famer who spent his career going head-to-head with LeBron on the basketball court. On February 23, 2024, Kevin Garnett was recording an episode of his KG Certified podcast with Paul Pierce. They were having a fun debate about whether LeBron's son Bronny could score on his father in a one-on-one matchup. Pierce said yes, Bronny could get a bucket. Garnett disagreed, and then he said this.
Bronny get a bucket on Bron right now?
Yeah, he can get a bucket on Bron right now.
Nope.
The debate was heated, with Pierce insisting Bronny had the quickness while Garnett wasn't having any of it.
He is, but you seen his dad? His dad on that balcony. He on that new juice.
He on that new juice. Now Garnett laughed it off, but that was a direct reference to Balco, the Bay Area Laboratory Cooperative, the most infamous doping lab in sports history, the same lab that supplied Barry Bonds, Marion Jones, and Tim Montgomery with undetectable steroids. When a first ballot Hall of Famer uses the word Balco and new juice in the same sentence while talking about another player, That is not a throwaway joke. That is a man telling you something without telling you something. And then came Tracy McGrady. In April of 2025, T-Mac was asked about LeBron's longevity, and his answer was careful, but it was loaded.
A 40-year-old man doing the basketball court is the greatest thing I ever seen in sports.
Yeah.
I would say that. It is the greatest thing my eyes have seen in sports.
T-Mac was genuinely in awe of what LeBron was doing, but then the tone changed.
So it seems like he can play till he's 45 if we want to, 48 if we
I don't know
want to.
how he's doing it.
Yeah.
I hope it's the right way.
I hope it's the right way. That right there is a former peer and fellow Hall of Famer expressing doubt about how LeBron James is maintaining his body. T-Mac even added that if it wasn't the right way, it would be devastating to the sport. He didn't accuse, he didn't name names, but the implication was crystal clear, and everybody watching knew exactly what he meant. And then came Jeff Teague. In July of 2025, the retired NBA guard went on his Club 520 podcast and flat out said it.
He was on steroids, bro. He had to sit out. He was on steroids for real.
Teague wasn't vague. He wasn't subtle. He pointed to a specific period during LeBron's Miami Heat tenure when the league began testing for HGH, and LeBron suddenly sat out with what he said was a back injury, then came back noticeably thinner.
And they was like, yo, and he had to sit out. Like, he said his back was hurt, and he sat out for like 3 weeks, and he came back skinny.
Now, Teague later went on Patreon to say he was joking, that it was all praise for LeBron taken out of context. He said the media clipped him up and made it seem like something it wasn't.
We were literally giving LeBron praise of how dominant he was.
Yeah, y'all wasn't really watching the show. And I mean, that's why shit get clipped up.
But the damage was done. Teague even revealed that Draymond Green DM'd him to keep LeBron's name out his mouth, and his own father called him asking if he was trying to get the family killed. And by the summer of 2025, respected NBA insider Rick Booker from Fox Sports poured gasoline on the fire when he revealed on his On the Ball podcast that PED speculation about LeBron isn't just a fringe theory. It's basically an open secret among NBA players, coaches, and executives. He said insiders take it for granted and assume it's true, responding casually with things like, "Oh yeah, that's going on." Booker admitted he didn't have proof, which is why he wouldn't state it as fact, but he made it clear that inside NBA circles, the belief that LeBron is using PEDs is widespread and treated as matter of fact. So by the time Paul George got busted in January 2026, all of this was sitting right there, ready to explode, and the people who had been whispering were about to start shouting. The double standard. Now here's where everything collides. Paul George gets suspended. He blames it on mental health. The media questions him. And then the basketball world asks the one question the NBA doesn't want anyone to ask. If you're going to punish Paul George for 25 games over an improper medication, then why aren't you testing everybody else at the same level? Why aren't you looking at LeBron James? That's exactly what Gilbert Arenas and Rashad McCants brought up on the February 3rd, 2026 episode of Gil's Arena. The entire panel was sympathetic to what George was going through, the injuries, the mental toll, the pressure of that massive contract, but they couldn't ignore the elephant in the room.
He just lost one of the players of the big three for 25 games. We all see it.
Arenas acknowledged the devastating impact. Losing a key piece of your championship puzzle for 25 games right in the middle of the season is brutal. But then the conversation turned to what triggered the test in the first place.
That motherfucker out there doing windmills and 360s. You can't do that, man. You just can't do that.
See, Arenas was pointing out something that a lot of people noticed. Paul George had just dropped 32 points and hit 9 threes against Portland. He was dunking with authority, moving like a man 10 years younger, and according to the Gil's Arena panel, that kind of vintage performance is exactly what triggers enhanced testing. You play that well at 35 years old after battling injuries your whole career, and somebody at the league office raises an eyebrow. Somebody says, "Let's take a closer look." And when they did, they found something.
You just can't get caught. I believe him when he say this is mental health medicine. If I can't do this I want to do because of my body.
Arenas was making a distinction that a lot of people missed. He wasn't saying Paul George was wrong for wanting to feel better. He was saying the system doesn't care about your reasons. If you take something that's not approved and you get caught, that's on you. But, and this is the big but, why aren't they applying that same standard across the board? That's the question McCants drove home. He talked about the testing needing to be consistent, questioning why Paul George gets caught, but other players don't seem to face the same level of scrutiny. With all the scrutiny, Why isn't he under the same microscope? McCants asked, clearly referencing LeBron. Especially when it's about performance enhancers. And McCants wasn't just making noise. He tied it into the cultural aspect too. How mental health stigma in the black community pushes athletes towards shortcuts because asking for help is seen as weakness. That's real. That's a conversation that goes beyond basketball and touches something much deeper. But the double standard conversation is what really stuck, because when you lay it all out, the math doesn't add up. LeBron James is 41 years old. He's in his 23rd NBA season. He's averaging 22.5 points, 5.4 rebounds, and 7.2 assists on 60% true shooting. Those are numbers that most players in their prime would be proud of. He has never tested positive for anything in over 2 decades of professional basketball, but the whispers never stop. And the whispers have a paper trail, because the thing most people don't talk about, the thing that the mainstream media has largely avoided for years, is the biogenesis connection. Back in 2013, the DEA launched an investigation called Operation Strikeout into Biogenesis of America, a now defunct anti-aging clinic in Coral Gables, Florida, that was supplying performance-enhancing drugs to professional athletes, primarily in baseball. The scandal brought down players like Alex Rodriguez and Ryan Braun and led to over 20 MLB suspensions. But the investigation didn't stop at baseball. Unredacted DEA documents, over 1,400 pages, revealed that LeBron James's personal trainer, David Alexander, and his childhood friend and business manager, Randy Mims, were both implicated as clients of Carlos Acevedo, a key figure in the Biogenesis network. Acevedo told investigators that he supplied Alexander with PEDs, including peptides, testosterone, and HCG over a period of months. Alexander referred clients to Acevedo in exchange for free substances. And Mims, described in DEA documents as the manager of LeBron James, was observed meeting Acevedo and purchasing testosterone and metabolism-boosting injections. Now, and this is important, the DEA's lead agent on the case, Kevin Stanfill, stated clearly that there was never any indication that LeBron James did anything wrong. LeBron was never interviewed, never charged, and the investigation into him was closed without action. But the proximity, his trainer, his business manager, his inner circle, was enough to keep the speculation alive for over a decade. And when Balco founder Victor Conte went on the Dan Le Batard show in March 2024 and said there was reason to be suspicious of LeBron because of these associations, the conversation went from whisper to roar. And that's the world Paul George accidentally stumbled into by getting caught, by trying to explain it away with mental health, and by shining a spotlight on the NBA's drug testing policies. He didn't just expose himself, he exposed the entire system. He exposed the inconsistencies. He exposed the question of why a 35-year-old former All-Star gets 25 games and $11.7 million in fines, while a 41-year-old who has been accused by MMA fighters, Hall of Famers, NBA insiders, and connected to a federal doping investigation continues to play without so much as a raised eyebrow from the league office. The Sixers, meanwhile, were left to pick up the pieces. Head coach Nick Nurse said the team was disappointed but moving forward, calling George part of the family. And the NBA on Prime Crew tried to put a positive spin on it. They talked about how the Sixers could survive, how Kelly Oubre was back, how Maxey could carry the load.
I think in adversity, there's opportunity. So obviously this is an unfortunate situation. No one wants to see him miss time, especially under these terms.
That's the NBA's way. Spin it, move forward. But the questions aren't going away. And here is the uncomfortable truth that the NBA doesn't want you to think about too hard. LeBron James spends over $1.5 million annually on body maintenance, cryotherapy, hyperbaric chambers, personal chefs, specialized recovery protocols. His fans point to that as the reason he's defied Father Time. But his critics say it's the perfect cover story. And the NBA's own testing? Players can be tested randomly up to 4 times per season, and critics have long argued that EPO and microdose substances can clear the system within hours to days, making them nearly undetectable for anyone who knows what they're doing. As of right now, February 2026, LeBron James has never tested positive for any banned substance. There is no proof. There is no failed test. There is no formal investigation. But what there is, what Paul George's suspension accidentally revealed, is that the conversation isn't just happening happening on podcasts and social media anymore. It's happening inside the league. It's happening among the players. It's happening among the coaches and executives who see LeBron defy every known law of athletic aging and quietly wonder how. Paul George took a pill he wasn't supposed to take and got caught. And in getting caught, he didn't just lose 25 games and $11.7 million. He became the flashpoint for the biggest unanswered question in professional basketball. And whether the NBA likes it or not, that question isn't going anywhere anytime soon. Like this video? Click on the cards showing on your screen for more.